pony! Hello and welcome back to another Saviors of Uldum card review. First up we have High Priest Ahmet, 4 mana, 2/7 legendary for Priest. Whenever you summon a minion, set its health equal to this minion's. Now immediately I think of this card as a Divine Spirit plus Inner Fire, topsy-turvy sort of deck. I think a good card to use would be to combo this with Vivid Nightmare to summon 2 High Priestess Ahmets. And I think the idea is that you could have a bunch of pretty high health minions out on the board, and then if your opponent wasn't able to remove all of them, you could choose one Divine Spirit, Inner Fire, OTK. But then I also remembered the good old card Star Aligner, where if you control 3 minions with 7 health, deal 7 damage to all enemies. In reality, you only need 2 minions with 7 health because Star Aligner counts as the third. You know, in 2 turns, I think you could set up something kind of nice. A big counter to High Priestess Ahmet is if your opponent has any sort of big board removal. Of course, I think that's a sign of a good card if your opponent needs to use a ton of removal in order to get rid of it. It could be a very annoying card. Next up is Pressure Plate, 2 mana Hunter Secret, where after your opponent casts a spell, destroy a random enemy minion. Pretty much every deck plays spells, so likely this is going to trigger, and I think the way that secrets work is that if your opponent doesn't have any minions out on the board, then the secret won't trigger. You're guaranteed to get value off this card, it's just a matter of how much value are you actually going to get. The power level of this card depends on your matchup. If you're playing an opponent that has a lot of big minions, then this is going to get you more value, but if you're playing against an aggro opponent, then likely this is going to destroy, a 1/1, a 2/3, something like that. It's not going to be a ton of value. With that said, Hunter does still have some secret synergy, so I don't see this being their worst secret. It's not their best though, and I think it's somewhere on the fringe depending on how many secrets they would want to play. Next up is Generous Mummy, 3 mana, 5/4 neutral minion with Reborn, and your opponent's cards cost 1 less. Alright, so this is one of those cards that has a low cost, high stats with some sort of negative effect. The fact that it has Reborn is interesting because you can play this and then when it resummons it'll become a 5/1. Essentially for 3 mana you're gonna be able to have a potential 10 damage. The problem with this card though, and this is probably the worst one of those cards that has a negative effect, is that it essentially gives your opponent an extra mana crystal when this is out on board. The main purpose of these cards is to get early game tempo, right? So you probably want to play this around turn 3, 4, something like that. By reducing the cost of all of the cards in your opponent's hand, you're essentially giving them 1 extra mana for the time being. So the next turn, instead of them playing a 3-drop or a 4-drop, they're likely going to play a 4-drop or a 5-drop, and that's going to completely counter Generous Mummy. Again, with Reborn, even if they do kill this the first turn that you play it, it's going to come back as a 5/1. It's also going to come back still reducing the cost of your opponent's cards, but that's the cost of this card. I like the design of this Reborn card. I've liked a lot of the designs actually, but I think Generous Mummy falls into the same category of just a Reborn card that isn't really going to see play. But next up, we have Grand Mummy, 2 mana, 1/2 priest minion with Reborn, and Death Rattle, give a random friendly minion +1/+1. So this is where Reborn could really thrive with a Death Rattle card. 2 mana, 1/2 isn't amazing stats, but with just the Reborn alone, it comes back as a 1/1, making this a total of 2/3 stats. It's still not great to trade out on the board, and with Reborn, this Death Rattle's likely gonna trigger twice. So over the lifetime of this card, it could end up being 2 mana for 4/5 stats, which is pretty good. But my main concern about this card is not its individual power level, but rather Priest's ability to use this card. I don't think they really have a good tempo deck, and that's what this card mainly relies on. Maybe they could do some Death Rattle or resummoning stuff, and maybe there is a tempo deck in there, it just hasn't had enough strong early game for it to work. But I'm not sure, because if you don't draw a Grand Mummy, what other 2-drops are you going to play? What good 1-drops do they have? Do they have good curve into 3, 4, 5, 6, etc.? Are they going to be able to make a consistent curve for a tempo deck? Grand Mummy might just be one of those cards that it's good enough to basically see play in any priest deck, kind of like a Northshire Clerk. I think it's a good card on its own. I hope Priest can take advantage of it. It actually might end up being an annoying card just because of how much buffing it does and the fact that it has Reborn. I like the design of this card and I think it has the potential to be good, but I just don't think Priest is going to be able to take advantage of it. And next up we have Big Boy Colossus of the Moon, 10 mana 10/10 legendary neutral minion with Divine Shield and Reborn. So when this dies, it's going to come back as a 10/1 with Divine Shield, and that makes it pretty annoying to get rid of as well. It means that your opponent is going to have to deal damage at least 4 times to this minion in order to finally kill it, unless they just use silence. 10 mana for a 10/10, it's not great, especially because at 10 mana you can't do anything else on that turn. What's nice is that it's pretty reliable to stick on the board, and what's especially nice is for a deck like Resummoning Priest, when Colossus of the Moon dies and is reborn and then dies again, it adds 2 copies of the minion to your resummoning pool, so it's more likely that you'll get this. And just imagine resummoning 2 or 3 of these out on the board. How is your opponent going to deal with that? Maybe with the new Priest spell that silences all minions and destroys them, but I don't even know if there is going to be a Resummoning Priest. I think if there is, this is a strong contender, because unlike cards like Ysera, which are more value-based, I think this could help speed up the Resummoning Priest deck and allow them to have big minions out on the board that could possibly deal a bunch of damage if their opponent can't remove them. It also depends on the meta, because if there's aggro decks that just destroy any chance of a Resummoning Priest, then that means it's going to be pretty tough for any deck to play a 10 mana minion, especially one that aggro decks can just ignore and go face if they want to. It's going to be a tough one, but if you can get this out on the board and survive, then your opponent better have a lot of removal. Next up is Plague of Wrath, 5 mana warrior spell, destroy all damaged minions. This is a pretty decent card. You can combo it with Whirlwind for only 6 mana and basically destroy all the minions unless there's ones with Divine Shield or other exceptions. The one big drawback is that you also destroy any of your own friendly minions that are damaged, so that's a bit of a shame. At 5 mana, it is a little expensive. It's definitely still a powerful removal spell. Obviously, a card like Brawl is just going to be better because you can guarantee you kill all minions except for one. I could see a Control Warrior adding this to their deck, but if there's a lot of aggro decks, then I don't know how useful this 5 mana spell would be. Removal is always good. This does require some extra work, whether that's trades or other spells or cards to combo with it, but still, I think at one point Warrior is going to use this card, and it could very well be next expansion. Next up is Sunstruck Henchmen, 4 mana 6/5 neutral minion, where at the start of your turn, this has a 50% chance to fall asleep. Oh man, this is a tough one. So falling asleep means you wouldn't be able to attack with the minion that turn, just like the first turn that you play most minions. And man, have 50% chance that you can't use your 6/5 minion? That's pretty rough. Yeah, this is probably one of the worst ogre henchman cards out there. Yeah, I don't even know if this card is good in Arena. That 50-50 chance is, it's really punishing. I don't think this is going to be a card that sees any play. And last up, we have our good old boy Hearthstone Trump's card reveal, Hack the System. The 1 mana warrior quest where you have to attack 5 times with your hero, and your reward is Anthrofet's Core, the hero power where you summon a 4/3 golem, and you can refresh the hero power and play it again by attacking with your hero. But regardless, at the start of your next turn, you're always going to be able to use your hero power, so it's not like you have to continue to attack in order to get it back. With that said, completing the quest I think is going to be a bit of a challenge. Weapon Projects is a cheap and useful weapon that you can use 3 times. Heroic Strike is an option if you want. And then Warrior has their slew of weapons, whether you're going with a more control deck like Super Collider, or you want to go with a Bomb Warrior like Wrench Caliber. You can even use Soul Thrays if you want to get the quest out early. There are weapon options for Warrior, it's just a question of how quickly would they be able to complete the quest. I think this hero power is definitely good. I still don't know if this hero power is worth all of that trouble though, incorporating these different weapons in your deck or ways of attacking. Ultimately, I don't see that much power level difference between Anthrofet's Core and the big red button that Dr. Boom has. I think the quest is just a bit too much of a hassle for it to actually see play, and the reward just isn't really worth it. I was really hoping they'd go a different direction with the hero power, but I'm not really impressed by this card. Alright, those were all of the cards for today. It is currently hot as balls, and I'll be back tomorrow with some more. So until next time, ta-ta.